Well, welcome to the Legends Community Show. I'm your host, Greg Bell. And guys, you know what we're going to spend all day talking about. So before I jump into the NBA championship, I want to talk about some of the other championships that kind of passed over this past week. You know, we want to throw a shout out to the Pittsburgh Penguins. Man, they take care of the Nashville Predators 5-0 in the fifth game, 2-0 the score. And, you know, when you start thinking about greatest of all time, are you going to say the name Sidney Crosby? That's a question you got to ask yourself if you're a hockey aficionado. And I'm not going to sit here and lie to you because you guys know by now. I know a little bit about hockey. I know they're phenomenal athletes on the ice. Hand-eye coordination, above all things, a 10. But when you start talking about hockey, you hear the name Wayne Gretzky. You hear the name Gordie Howe. You hear the name Bobby Orr, Mario Lemieux. He hung, or I shouldn't say he hung, he hoisted the Smythe Trophy. Of course, that's another MVP of the series. And the Pittsburgh Penguins hoisted Sir Stanley. And you got to say to yourself, if you're a hockey aficionado, this might be one of the best Pittsburgh Penguin teams of all time. You got to say, man, they took on all odds. And to go into Nashville and beat the Predators 2-0, and I know I'm going to hear it. Somebody's going to come back and say to me, yeah, but you know what? Had they not called the whistle and let that score go, you know, that's what ifs. When you start talking what ifs, I shut down the camera. I want to talk is what is. And what is the Pittsburgh Penguins are now the 2017 world champions of the NHL. Of course, you got to sit there and start saying to yourself, do we see a dynasty in the making? Because this Nashville team, guys, I see them back there next year. Pittsburgh always has a hard time roll because they got to go up against the Detroit Red Wings. And let's face it, the Detroit city, and that's the whole aura of hockey in Detroit, seems to be better than anywhere else in the world. So we're going to throw out a little shout out to them and basically say congratulations to the Pittsburgh Penguins on winning another NHL Stanley Cup. Want to talk about the playoffs. I got this question, and I got to ask this one because there are a couple things I want to throw at you here. You know, I'm sure everybody heard about the guy who dropped $60,000 per ticket for 2 floor seats. And it started making me wonder, if you were sitting back and you had money to burn, you know, let's face it, whoever this guy was, he had plenty money to burn. If you had any opportunity in the world, if we had a time machine that could take you back to anything in the world that you want to see, what would be that one event that you would spend that kind of coin to go back and see? I mean, I was listening to people talk about, you know, opportunities to go back and see Jimi Hendrix or see Marvin Gaye at his heyday, or even maybe the Beatles. I started saying to myself, you know, when you love sports the way I love sports, what would be the one thing I would do more than anything? And I got to tell you guys, it became harder and harder to think of that one event. You know, I love music. Yeah, it'd probably be great to go back and see the last concert in London that Luther Vandross sung. Or, you know, maybe it was that last concert that Michael Jackson performed for, you know, somebody of my era. I mean, some people would say it'd be the last concert in the heyday of Pink Floyd or Bruce Springsteen. But when you're talking about football or basketball, guys, you know what? If you've listened to the show, you know when you start talking of Greg Bell, you know, I tell people all the time I wasn't the greatest football player or the greatest basketball player. I thought I was a really, really great athlete, that I could do so many things. But there's one thing that was always a love of mine. And I told somebody, I said, if I could do anything and I had a time machine, and regardless of the cost of it, I would want to go back to the Olympics and watch Jesse Owens run. That would be the one thing, the fly to Germany, to see Adolf Hitler sitting to the side and to see Jesse Owens put on a feat that no man has ever really matched. We talk about Usain Bolt and Carl Lewis and all these guys, but this guy was a showstopper. And I would pay any money if I could time travel myself back to that Olympics in Berlin to see Jesse Owens, see Adolf Hitler. If there was one event that I personally would want to be live at, that would be my choice. What would be yours? I want to hear from you. Let me think. Just think about it. I mean, if you could travel back in time, or if you had enough money where it wasn't a question of cost, what one event would you want to see? I just told you. Mine, of course, is going back and seeing, a childhood legend, someone that I was fortunate enough in my lifetime to actually get a chance to meet. But to go back to Berlin and watch Jesse Owens run, that would be the time that I would spend the money. I wouldn't care what the coin would be. If we could have any event to watch and just relive, what would I spend that kind of money on? Going back to Berlin. The airline ticket would have to be first class, without a doubt. I don't know about you guys, but when I get on a plane to go across the ocean, I need to lay down. First class is the only way to travel. That would be the question. Yeah, I don't know who this guy is who dropped the $60,000 this past week to see LeBron lose to the Golden State Warriors. But evidently he's got a lot of coin to blow, because $60,000 for 2 floor seats the night of. And see, I'll be honest, I heard it was $90,000 a seat. So the guy he really was a big time basketball fan, whoever it was. And it's got to be hilarious, because whoever the ticket broker is, either the guy was trying to give himself a pat on the back, or I need to get rid of this ticket broker because he should keep my business private. When you start comparing percentages is true. Even though they didn't have the 3-point shot back then, World Beat Free was letting it fly, trust me, from 3-point range. And so the percentages are all the same. The fact that they were able to sweep through teams. And I mean, remember, that 76er team swept the Lakers 4-0, which, let's remember, Magic was on that team. He was a baby, but Magic was on that team, and so was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, so was Worthy, so was Jamal Wilkes. I mean, it was a very good Laker team that got swept by the 76ers. So when we start to compare the team side of it, we're talking about really comparing the percentages, the numbers, putting man to man. Could this guy guard this guy, blah, blah, blah. And you're going to hear it from now until this team dismantles. And we're going to talk about that too, because the question is how long will the reigns be for this Golden State team? Because let's face it, Clay is going to have to get a max deal. And at the same time, Curry's going to be wanting a max deal. And Draymond is going to want a max deal. There's only so much money in the salary cap. And we didn't even talk about the fact that Kevin Durant will get his max deal next year. So the question is going to eventually fall on the hands of this Golden State management. Can we keep this team together? And think about it, guys. I want to go through some of the greatest teams to ever play in the NBA. You got to start off with the greatest franchise, most wins, and only 4 times in 21 trips to the NBA Finals. You're looking at the Boston Celtics. And think about it, guys. The Celtics have had some runs. And no matter if you're an old believer or a young believer, a guy like Bill Russell can play in today's game. I don't care how you look at it. His skill set was so high back then, that is why they won 8 or 9 in a row. Then you got the Minnesota Lakers. And when you start talking about the Minnesota and the Los Angeles Lakers, you're really looking at those Lakers of 2000s plus. You're looking at, I say 2000 plus, but I really mean 1982 plus. You got to talk about the Shaq and Kobe dynasty. You got to talk about the Magic and Kareem dynasty. But when you start really making comparables, here's where you start to see none of them shot the type of percentage that Golden State shot. Amazing percentage, guys. I mean, these guys were hitting long-range shots at a 54% range. 54% from the three-point is amazing. I don't care how you look at it, even in high school, college, or pros, to get beyond the arc and shoot 50% or more, those are high percentage shots now. I mean, I can tell you what, there are more teams who, as a team, shoots 47 inside of the arc. But when you're hitting over 50%, as both the Cavaliers and Golden State were doing, you were seeing a phenomenal game. This whole series has had phenomenal play. But when you start talking about dynasties, there are a lot of teams that you can look at and talk about that. Not even talking about the 76ers or even talking about the Lakers. I think the one team that everybody wants to focus on, because so many people are going back and talking about that, 92, 93, and 91, and even the 98 Chicago Bulls team. And when you start really thinking about it, here's my only defense here, that I have to stop and I have to backtrack a lot of times when I think about these two teams, because Golden State's got some girth. They've got some power underneath the board. Might not be in the size of Bill Cartwright or Horace Grant, but Draymond Green, they bring in a different era of big men. They got big men who actually can shoot the ball. And that's where the problem lies for the Chicago Bulls. The only problem I do have with the Golden State Warrior team is that the one person that everyone thinks that no one can defense, I got to step back and say, you know what? I'm one of those guys that believe when you're Scottie Pippen and you're 6'8" and you got a wingspan of a 7-foot man, all of a sudden now I think you can defend a guy like Kevin Durant. Now, I'm not going to tell you he's going to shut Kevin Durant down. But personally, I think if Scottie Pippen were guarding Kevin Durant, I'm not going to see a triple-double out of him. I'm not going to see a guy who's capable of getting 13 rebounds, getting 10-plus assists. But I might still find this guy, because of his range, being able to shoot for 30 points. That's not a question. I think it's hard to stop a 7-footer who can shoot the 28-footer. That's literally impossible, because most of the times you're not going to defend a hand right in his face like that. You're going to give him a little space, and you actually want him to shoot that shot. But here, with Scottie Pippen on Kevin Durant, I got to tell you, he's not going to be a triple-double guy. Now, let's go to the guard play. Let's face it, nobody's going to stop Jordan, but at the same time, I think Mike has a good chance of stopping Curry, because Curry now has not only a 6'7", 6'6" guy on him, but a 6'7" guy who can actually footwork and stay with him and can jump. So now all of a sudden, I don't think Curry is going to be a 30-point performer. I think one of the stats they talked about, and there are about 3 guys in history, these two being 2 of them, Kevin Durant and Curry both averaged 25 points. I don't think they're both going to average 25 points against this Bull team. Another great defender that the Bulls would bring off the bench, and I think he actually causes the most damage to this Golden State team, is going to be Ron Harper. Harper guarding Klay Thompson. I don't see Klay with the foot speed or the leaping ability to be able to deal with a guy like Ron Harper. Now, I'm not going to say that I'm telling y'all this because Harper's one of my boys. We came up together in Ohio, but I'm just telling you, this guy's a good defender. That was one of the things you wouldn't take away from Ron Harper. When Harper was a Clipper, he was a scorer. But when he got to the Chicago Bulls, he became an excellent defensive man. And so now you match those two teams evenly on their 3-man rotation, as I call it. Now the question comes, Draymond or Rodman? And I don't think no one on earth is going to tell you that Draymond is going to do what he does against Dennis Rodman. I just don't see it happening. Rodman was a very excellent defender. And from a rebounding guys, he is the smallest rebounding king I think I know, and he did it better than anybody else. The one area I will give Golden State a lot is their 5th big man that comes in, David West or Iguodala. I don't know if Kukoc is going to be able to handle that player. Now, Tony Kukoc was a hell of a left-hander, a great European player, but I don't think I'm going to put him on David West and really expect David West not to at least dominate him on the boards as well as a little bit on offense. So that's where you kind of get the flim flam, the comparison from those two great teams. But the one thing I think that most people tend to forget about that Bulls team that went back to back on both different occasions, Phil Jackson had a strong bench, man. They could bring guys off the bench to do what Golden State does on a daily basis. Craig Hodges, John Paxson, Steve Kerr. And, you know, the most amazing thing about this whole playoff, and now it's really going to really heat up a lot more because they actually won now and they've got 2 rings. No one has ever – I haven't heard Steve Kerr once sit down and go, you know, my 98 team, you know, it's so funny. We're talking about his back, and we're going to talk about that a little bit as well. We're talking about his back being injured, but he injured it playing with the Bulls on a great team. And Steve was a great clutch shooter. You know, he came in and drilled big shots just like John Paxson. Bill Cartwright, Uncle Bill, he was out there. And, you know, here's a strong 7'1" guy who did his job. Block shots, grab rebounds. That was his purpose. And I don't see anybody in Golden State that's like Big Bill. Or I don't see the young studs coming off the bench. And, yeah, you know, you can say what you want about the finals game, how they brought some of the guys off the bench. They kept the lead. They kept them close. But when you really start to look at that 98 Bulls team, I just tell people all the time, I don't know if you can compare apples to apples with this team because after a while, the apples start to become in pairs for Golden State. And if you're a Golden State Warrior fan, I know you're mad at me now, but I'm just thinking at heart. I'm just trying to look at comparing the percentages. I'm comparing the two teams because their 72-win team was in that era. And you, of course, have your 73-win team. And I'm just telling you, the more and more that I think about comparing the two teams, I don't want to compare who's better because they were all the best at what they did in their era. But not only did that Bulls team sweep through people and run through people the same way Golden State does, they also pounded people. You know, it was a whole different ball game back in the 90s. You know, in the 80s, it was a much more physical game. You know, the hand checking that was a part of the game. The clubbing, the hitting guys, all of that stuff, elbowing, all the things that were flagrant ones now, they never called them in the NBA back in that era. So when you're comparing the eras, you got to compare the rules. You got to compare the styles. I don't think anybody can keep up with the style of Golden State. Not even that Bulls, neither of the repeat teams with the Bulls. I don't think any of the Lakers. And I say this because this is a fast team. It's a nimble team. They're not as big, but because of their accuracy from the three-point line, they don't have to be that big. As you score 2, they score 3. Who's going to win that battle? So it's all about stops in the NBA when you start comparing the great teams. And that's why I say sometimes, you know, I think the Bulls could have created more stops against this Golden State team. Now, that's just me talking. That's my opinion. I'm not a diehard Bull fan. I'm just looking at the facts that stand in front of me when you start looking personnel to personnel. And when you start really thinking about personnel to personnel, the one thing you got to put into that equation is coaching personnel to coaching personnel. I think both Steve Kerr and Phil Jackson have created a new genre in their game. Phil Jackson's triangle was a new thing at that time. Nobody knew how to stop it. And unfortunately, sometimes if you get the right players today, they still don't know how to stop it. But you got to take 2 steps back and look at what Steve Kerr has been able to do with his genre. He's taken a smaller, nimbler, quicker team. Don't need to be big, but he's gotten big play. Trust me, Klay Thompson is 6'5". He's big. Curry, 6'3". He is not a small guard. When you start thinking of Isaiah Thomas, he's 5'7". But when you start thinking about personnel, no, we don't have the big one guard who's 6'6" like Michael Jordan or like Kobe Bryant. But you got Klay, who's a 6'5", 2 guard with amazing range. And that's something that you don't typically find on most teams. And the worst part about this Golden State team is they've got a 1, a 2, a 3, and a 4 who all shoot the three-pointer like it's a layup. So no matter how you look at it, stops are the number one thing you have to have in order to beat this Golden State team. Last year, LeBron got off to a great start. If you look at the game that they had, game 4 this year, if their three-pointers aren't hitting over 40%, and did you hear I came down 10% there? Not 20, not 50%, like most people have to play in order to beat Golden State. But if they're at 40% and you're getting more stops, you're still going to squeak by this Golden State team like LeBron and them did in game 4. But if you can create more stops and you're shooting 50% from the arc, oh man, you're going to get some wins against this Golden State team. And I think that when we compare Jordan versus this Golden State team, a lot of Jordan people are going to say that's still the greatest team that they've ever seen. And the one thing that's nice about the Jordan team that they can stand on that nobody is really going to be able to stand on until, who knows when, is going to be the fact that they have something that nobody can else say. They went 6-0 in their final appearances. Now, mind you, they've only been there 6 times, and maybe another one they can be 6-1. But the one thing Michael Jordan stands tall on, taller than anybody ever is going to stand on, and because of the fact that LeBron has been in the NBA Finals, I want to say 12 out of his 13 or 13 out of his 14 years in the NBA, he stands on that alone. But the fact that Jordan has been to 6 finals and has won 6 rings. Guys, it's all about the bling. Let's be honest about that. And the fact that he can put up 2 hands full of rings, and that's all he's ever been to, 6 finals, 6 wins. Should I say more? Not much more you can say about that other than the fact that that's astonishing on its own. And yes, when we look at the Boston Celtics, the fact that they've got 17 world championships, here's the one thing that everybody's got to remember. There were only 8 teams when they first started. The parity is somewhat it's giant now. The parity of basketball is different than it was back in the late 40s, early 50s. So the fact that there were only a handful of teams to play for a championship, and you just happen to, you go on a run of 10 in a row, I'm not taking anything away from those Boston teams, but it's different now. I mean, this is a different era, and you've got to really look at that era as it stands now. You're listening to the Legends Community Show. I'm your host, Greg Bell. We're going to continue talking a lot of more basketball before I'm done. I want to talk to you about Floyd Mayweather, Money Mayweather's camp, of course, through the August 26th date out there to Conor McGregor. They want to get it handled. They wanted to be in MGM in Las Vegas. The question now is, will McGregor's camp agree to the August 26th date? And, I mean, it's kind of funny. We've been hearing about this fight all year long. And to hear the date August 26th today is pretty amazing because that tells me not only has Floyd been training, he's getting himself ready. So if that's, I heard Mike and Mike today, they were talking about the fact Mike said that would be something he would spend his money on. And I think he wants to spend his money to go to the tables more than he wants to see the fight. But what the heck? That's what he wants to do with his money. I'm still stuck on Berlin, guys. If you didn't hear me earlier, what would you spend any amount of money to see one event? That's my question to you. Give me your answer. Okay, Laker fans, staying on basketball. Lonzo had his workout. Didn't hear rave reviews about it, but guess what? Who really can rave about one-on-one against yourself? It wasn't like this is a guy who dazzles you with his jump shot, with his leaping ability, all of which Lonzo Ball has. But the one thing that he can't show is his leadership and his way of distributing the ball to all his players. That's something that we had to see in college. And if you saw Lonzo Ball in college, you saw a guy with a lot of the gifts, a lot of those magical gifts that Magic himself had. He's able to bring players along, get them into the flow of the game. He's a true leader. I think the Lakers are going to make him their second pick. Fultz, the University of Washington will probably go number 1 to Boston. Will it matter? Who knows? Because there's a lot that's going to happen between now and the end of this month. Draft being on the 22nd of June, a lot is going to happen between now and the 22nd. Guys, the Lakers are sitting at number 2, but they're also sitting with a harem of young talent in their garage. And at some point, you're going to open up the garage door and decide to put an old Bentley in there. You're going to go get a Paul George out of Indianapolis. You're going to go and get yourself possibly a Blake or somebody. There's going to be a lot of talk between now and the 22nd of what the Lakers are going to do to build this franchise. The one thing I feel comfortable is that the man behind the franchise is going to get it done, and that's Magic. That's the one thing I can tell you. He loves the game. He knows the game. He has that intuition to put the pieces together. And I think if you look back at when he played and he was the captain of that team with Kareem, he brought that team together. When that glue went, so did a lot. And so bringing that glue back, I'm comfortable knowing that Magic's at the helm, and he's going to do what's necessary to get this Laker team back to glory. Lonzo Ball, man, have you heard much about his dad? Isn't it amazing how LeVar is starting to quiet down a little bit? And mind you, don't forget, when Klay Thompson came out, Michael Thompson was very vocal as well. Most people tend to think, these guys know the game. Now, I'm not telling you LeVar is Michael Thompson by any means, but he's done a great job with his 3 boys. All 3 of them will be Bruins. All 3 of them will have their shot at the NBA ring. And all 3 of them seem to be doing just fine listening to their father and not actually being like their father. So don't blame the messenger, or how they say, don't blame the delivery. Blame I can't get that one out right, but don't blame the kids for the father's mistakes, okay? Also, guys, you got to give a hat. There's another thing that happened last week that I don't know if you follow it, but it's one of those sports that I follow from just on the outside, and that's tennis. If you want to look at some really fabulous athletes, tennis kind of incorporates everything. Eye, hand, foot, just everything is there from an athletic standpoint. Rafael Nadal does something that, nobody else in the history has done. French Open, he's won it 10 times. And that's basically, he is the master of the French Open. Nobody else has even come close. Over his career, 10 French Open titles. Now he's just got to put a U.S. title on his belt, and he's got the Grand Slam done. Hats off to Rafael Nadal. Funny, I'm going to tell you, and this was really shocking to me, football fans, how many of you got a curveball last week when we talked about what Ohio State did to their coach, Thad Matta, the fact that they fired him in June? How crazy was it for you in June to hear that Bob Stoops was stepping down from Oklahoma? It took me all totally by surprise. It leaves Oklahoma, of course, they gave his successor the job. Lincoln Riley will take over. But how crazy is it for these young men who put their faith in Bob Stoops? And mind you, whatever the reason, and for him, he said the reason he was just basically burnt out. But Bob Stoops stepping down from a program that he is the winningest coach in history and a program that he's won a dual national championships, got himself a couple of national championships. And I didn't hear too many naysayers faulting him for deciding to step down at that point in the equations. We blasted Gene Smith a week ago. I didn't hear a lot of the people blasting Bob Stoops for leaving abruptly in June when the season starts in July. 30 days, 40 days from when these kids are going to be back on that campus playing football, and their head coach decides to take it and call it quits. So it's kind of funny the way you hear the media. They side one way or another, and it really doesn't matter to me. If it's the season was starting tomorrow, and I had to step down because of health reasons, because of burnt out, whatever, that's why they have assistant head coaches. That's why there's no, one man doesn't row the boat. That's why that's why they say it's a team. And so sometimes you have to be prepared for the unpreparable, I guess you can say it. He steps down, I mean, literally 45 to 50 days before these guys are going to be prepared. And I don't think OU, I want to say I saw that they were going to play Clemson or somebody. They're going to play a top 10 team the first game of the year, and now they're doing it without Bob Stoops. So it does matter, especially at the college level. The head coach does a lot more than just manage ball players like in the pros. His presence means something to these young, impressionable minds. And to leave 45, 60, heck, to leave 7 days before. There have been a lot of different occasions where sometimes that helps these kids focus a little bit more and they rise to the occasion. You're listening to the Legends Community Show. I'm your host, Greg Bell, guys. Just a lot of crazy news. And we'll get back to basketball, but I just wanted to throw out some crazy news. Ronaldo, how many people, anybody out there got about 14, maybe $15 million to help him with this tax evasion lawsuit? More money, more problems. That's all I ever tell people sometimes. Don't always think just because these guys make a boatload of money that the problems don't exist. Tax evasion, guys, that's something I don't want to hear that by any means. Greg Bell, tax evasion investigation. That's one of those things I want to stay as far to the left as I can. Cristiano Ronaldo got his hands full there. Al Pacino. How many people out there are Al Pacino fans? Now, I love Al Pacino. No greater movie than The Godfather. Yes. It's the best movie when you want to just talk about one-liners, man. You want to come, Tony Montana, just everything. He's made so many great gangster movies, none better than The Godfather. Do we want to see Al Pacino play Joe Paterno? I saw that on the news, and it's a good match, especially at his age right now. But, at some point in your life, you got to stand up for more than the role. But maybe Al Pacino is playing it because he wants to bring light to the role, make sure the role is played right. Al Pacino to play Joe Paterno in the new movie about the great legendary football coach that was defamed from the sex allegations that rocked Penn State just 10 years ago. And not only, I got to figure out who they're going to have as the son, because the son got arrested a year ago for the exact same thing that the father got, I shouldn't say the son. Let me apologize. It wasn't Joe Paterno's son. It was the crazy assistant coach's son. Now he's up for the same criminal defense that his father was up there. And, his father's spending the rest of his life in jail. And you know what? Here's the beauty of it. I don't even remember the guy's name. And at this point in the equation, we don't need to know his name. We just know he was a pedophile. But Al Pacino is going to play the part of the legendary coach Joe Paterno. Yay or nay? Yay or nay? That's one of those things. You really got to be in the role. And I can see him playing the part of Joe Paul. And here's the funny thing. A lot of people never got a chance to meet Joe Paterno. I was fortunate enough to get the meeting when I was being recruited by Penn State. He's a different character, man. These head coaches that we've given them like God-type status, the Woody Hayeses, the Joe Paternos, the Bo Schembechlers, the Ara Parseghians, the Wizard of Westwood, John Wooden. These guys have such a different aura about them, it'll blow your mind. I don't think I've ever met someone like Coach Wooden, but, close to me was Woody Hayes, and Joe, unfortunately, didn't come up through the Woody Hayes regime like so many other coaches had, but these guys have their little quirkinesses about them, and this guy was about as quirky could be. I don't think I met a quirkier guy than Joe Paterno with the glasses. He wore the same high-water pants and those old-style those spot belt coaching shoes, and he wore them like they were religious, man, every day. I mean, it was just he was a quirky guy. But he knew what he was doing. He knew how to bring men together for a common cause, and that was to play football and actually go and get a college education. So, there are a lot of good things that will fly with the name Joe Paterno, and really one bad scenario that we're going to have to live through. But unfortunately, like I say, sometimes you got to take the good with the bad. And in Joe Paterno's case, the fact that he kind of turned a blind eye to that situation really puts a real negative light to a lot of people because it was children that were being turned eye. He was turning his head towards the children. Okay, before I go back on the NBA, I want to jump into one NFL story real quick. I want to get your feelings on it. Odell Beckham finally reports, even though he's been dancing with Izzy Isaiah for about the last 2 months. I guess they're dating now. I don't know what's going on with these young guys. Pass the buck, I guess. But Odell Beckham still unsigned. Aaron Donald, Ram fans. I'm getting a little edgy because he's one person I need to see in there, same as Odell. But Melvin Ingram signs a 4-year, $66 million deal. What is it about the stars that we can't put them in their position, give them their money? Even if it's the max money, Odell Beckham is one of the top 3 receivers, and I think I read something like 14 receivers was making more money than him. Come on, Giants. And Aaron Donald, he is the number 1 nose tackle, defensive tackle in the NFL right now. Even though one man doesn't mean we win more games, you got to give him credit for what he's doing for that defense. Aaron Donald is the mainstay of that defense. Pay him the money. Let's get him signed. OTAs, mini camps are now going, and neither one of these guys are actually playing. Most of them are there, but they're not there. Because how can you take a risk in minicamp with your highest paid player? I don't know, but please, of course, I'm talking to the Ram fans here in Southern California. Let's get Aaron Donalds in there. Back to the NBA. You're listening to The Legends Show. I'm your host, Greg Bell, and we're going to run down through a couple milestones that I heard over this past week. I know there are a lot of LeBron James haters out there, but let me give you one stat that really talks to the volume of LeBron James. He is one of only 4 men in America. And this was a pretty astonishing total when I heard it, because when you think about all the different sports, and I want you to think about this, how many number 1 first-round draft picks, the number 1 picks, how many of them have led their teams to a world championship? Think about that. Baseball, basketball, soccer, hockey, football. Only 4. 4, and 3 of them came off the ice. Patrick Kane, Crosby, and LaFleur, the goalie for the Pittsburgh Penguins. He was drafted in 2005, Crosby in 2003. Both of them were the first picks of the draft, and they've actually taken their team to the payday. Not one other NBA number 1 draft pick has done that. Think about that. When you're criticizing LeBron James, he's done one thing. He was the number 1 pick, and he actually lived up to the fruition, lived up to the calling, lived up to the honor of being the number 1 pick and taking them to the payday. 4 guys, man, in all the sports that I just went through, only 4 have actually done that. So for all those LeBron James haters out there and all those people right now who are making the comparison, who's better? And I know you listened to the series this week. You saw Paul Pierce on TBS, and you heard him say that Kevin Durant is now the best player in the NBA. And I gotta say to Paul Pierce, thank God you were a great basketball player, but you're a terrible odds picker. You won't be getting a job anytime soon in Las Vegas because you might have dethroned the king a little too soon. I don't know about you, but I watched him put up 33 points a game, 12 rebounds, and 10 assists, becoming the first player in NBA history to post a triple-double in the finals. Now think about that. Of all the great players that have played in the NBA, he is the first to post a triple-double in the finals. Now, I know it doesn't sound like much to many of you, but guys, just putting together triple-doubles, if you didn't hear it this past year with Russell Westbrook, it ain't an easy thing to do. Oscar Robertson used to do it on the average. Russell Westbrook became the highest doer, I guess you can call it, of triple-doubles in the NBA history. He's done something that nobody else has done. But now we're talking about the NBA Finals. First off, Russell hasn't made it there yet. LeBron has been there 13 times to the NBA playoffs, I should say, not to the finals. He's been to the finals. I want to say he's been to the finals 10 of his 14 years. If you really think about it, 3 times with the Miami Heat. Another, 5 or 6 times now. He lost to the 76ers. He's been there about 5 times with the Clippers. So not necessarily 10 times, but 8 out of his 14 times he's been in the finals. This guy has done something that nobody else has done. To go through your career, take your team to the playoffs. And remember, the year before he got to Cleveland, they were the worst team in the league. That's how he got the number 1 pick. And he took them to the playoffs in his first year as a rookie. They went from night to day. And so to say that this guy isn't one of the greatest, or if not the greatest player to actually dribble that ball is a hard statement. And to say right now that Kevin Durant, because what? He joins a team that was already destined for the finals. And don't get this twisted anywhere here. Kevin Durant was the reason for the crown this year. No doubt about it. With Kevin Durant on this Golden State team, they were almost a no-lose opportunity, okay? Your money was safe on Golden State. But the fact of the matter is that Golden State team was going to be in the final whether he was there or wasn't. The question you have to ask yourself was this Cleveland team going to be in the finals if LeBron James wasn't there? And I saw him in games 2, 3, and 4 will himself to great performances. Of course, he took a couple plays off here and there. You go out there and you're playing 44 minutes, 47 minutes, 41 minutes. You play those kind of minutes at the professional level, you need a break. And this guy had to Tyronn Lue was really taking chances. Every time he took LeBron off the floor, he was taking a chance. So when you stop and you think about what he's been able to accomplish, and I hate to say in terms of a team play, but on his own, what he's been able to accomplish is mind-boggling. And to watch him perform this past week, the one thing I said in my heart and you could look at it any way you wanted to look at it is he gave me 200%. He did everything in his power to will this team to where they were. And sometimes, I hate to say it, his will isn't enough. Not when you're faced with the odds that he had to face. And I think he said it better than anyone, that this team has been built to last. And so he knows next year, the year after, and the year after that, this team is going to be in place, and this is going to be the team he's going to have to fight to win another NBA championship, especially if he's trying to win that NBA championship in the city of Cleveland. And, you can already hear the rumbling starting. Well, is he going to be in L.A.? Is he going to stay together? Is he going to stay and play for anybody other than Cleveland? He's at that point in his career that, he's been there a long time. And I don't care how you look at it. He came into the league at 18. He's still playing. He's playing very well. What is he, 37 now? Kobe played well into his 40s. And the one difference in between him and Kobe is his body is physically more developed. He's a bigger man. And I pray that nothing like the Achilles injury that Kobe suffered through, hopefully that never happens to LeBron, because he plays the game and he scares you. He plays the game so hard and so rough. And generally, as you get older, those ligaments get tighter. Hopefully that's something that we don't see. That's the one thing that probably is the most amazing thing about LeBron James is he's never hurt, or he plays through injuries better than any man that I've ever watched. He plays this game. I never see him twist the ankle. I never see him buckle a knee. I never see him grab a shoulder. Yeah, he gets his jam fingers and things of that nature, but it's almost amazing to watch him week in, week out over the last 14 years, is the fact that he never misses a game from injury. And to play this game at the way he plays this game is amazing to really watch. And so, all those naysayers, you're going to start making your comparisons. I'm going to say don't. Kevin Durant is the future. And the scary thing about it is, how many more Kevin Durants are we going to see? How many more 7-footers, lean, slim, quick, are we going to see popping up around the net? It's going to become a norm. The bigger players are going to want to play guard. You know, Kevin can play all 5 positions on the floor if he chooses to. He might not want to become a banger, but that's the difference in the game. He's 7 foot. He can be in that. He can be down in that box and be a center if he wants to, because he knows he's not going to get pounded on by a Bill Laimbeer or a Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I mean, that part of the game is what has changed it and has turned it and revolutionized the game to make it more, I guess you can say, fan friendly. You know, when you're seeing guys running up and down the ball court, shooting the three like it's a layup, it becomes exciting. And to see a guy who can be that accurate, and then to watch the Golden State team, you can't help but be fascinated by it. And, of course, you're going to look at KD because you've never seen a guy with the range that he has. Not only with the range, with the ball handling skills and the nimbleness and the way he can contort his body and make those layups that typically are there for a forward or guard. It's just amazing to watch, you know, Kevin Durant do what he does. But I'm not quite ready. Just not quite ready to put him into the king role. I think LeBron James probably has another year or two playing the way he played this finals this year. The question I have for the Cleveland management is, when are you going to work your magic? Because here's where it has to start. You got guys that you have under contract that you can deal. And it might be time to start putting those phone calls in, because unloading a guy like Tristan Thompson, Richard Jefferson is going to retire. Shumpert is probably going to take what he can get. JR, he's just happy to be there. And here's the thing. I don't think JR had the kind of season due to injury. He didn't have the kind of season he wanted to. So he's in that kind of precarious situation where you have to say to yourself, what if? What if he comes back and starts playing the way he was playing? I mean, if you watched him in the game 5, you saw a guy who still has the range. His range is still impeccable. He can still shoot the three better than anybody on the Cleveland Cavaliers. Do you let a guy go like that who you know is a microwave? You heat him up and he'll get going and he'll never stop. It's when he gets cold that you have to start to worry about a guy like J.R. Smith. And right now, Cleveland's got to start worrying about everybody minus their 3. And that third guy, believe it or not, is not Kevin Love. The third guy is really Tristan Thompson. But, you know, outside of his regular season play, I don't know if he's going to be that invaluable. I mean, he's going to be valuable to them as they start to go into the playoffs, because let's face it, who are they going to end up playing in the playoffs? Golden State. Tristan Thompson was invisible for 4 of the 5 games. His presence wasn't even felt. I think they said, what do you have, like 1 rebound? Might have had 10 points in 4 games. Comes out the 5th game, and he has a little bit more tenacity to his to his play. That's the Tristan Thompson you've got to get on a weekly basis, a daily basis, for him to make a true impact for this team. And he's got to be prepared. He's got really slow feet, but, you know, what big men don't. But he just, you know, if you're going to switch out the way they switch out, you can't put a guy like Tristan Thompson on a guy like Curry or even Dedmon. Oh, I'm going to butcher his name. But you can't even do that. So it's one of those things where, you know, Tristan has got to either get quicker feet, he's got to become a better defensive player, or they've got to come up with a different solution than switching out up at the top. Because Curry's going to kill you. Thompson's going to destroy you. And those are the guys he seems to be switching out on. And he doesn't even get a hand in their face because they're too quick for him. So, you know, the management of the Cleveland Cavaliers have really got to decide who they're going to live with and who they're going to have to come out and find to replace them. So those are just some important things that we're going to have to see. But I do want to talk about that game and, you know, what was the downfall. You know, last year, the reason Cleveland found themselves in that position was because of the shooting of Golden State. They fell below that 50 percentile. And LeBron ate them up for that. But last night was a little bit different, guys. It was a truly different game. You could see why KD is so important to this team. If you just tuned in, you're listening to Greg Bell. I'm here on the Legends Community Show, and we're wrapping it up, just finishing our day talking about this Golden State Warrior team. I want to know from you, when you watched that game last night, was there any point in that game where you actually said the Cleveland Cavaliers had a chance? And I know at 14 down and they came back and made it a 5-point game, you might have looked and said, oh, Cleveland got a chance. But did they really have a chance? You know, this Golden State team is one shot away from a spark. And generally that shot comes from KD or Curry from the three-point line. And I have to tell you, with, 10 minutes, 11 minutes left in the game, it pretty much shaped out. You could see they were on. And I'm going to just tell you, to watch Kevin Durant hold the ball for 4 or 5 seconds, not even take a step, but fade back and shoot a three. And the worst part is he started walking. He turned as the ball left his hand to say money. At that point in the game, I said this one was over. It was like you can call it quits. You can go to bed. You can call it a night. They just had it going on all night long, even when they were down to Cleveland. It was never a Cleveland game. And I think that kind of, at some point, LeBron had to get, destroyed. I mean, it was taking the wind out of his sail because he could see no matter what he did, LeBron is not a three-point guy. So he always pushes it to the rim. He scores, 35 points in a losing effort. How many guys do you know who have an output like he averaged 33 points, 12 rebounds, and 10 assists for the entire series, and they were only capable of winning one game? Think about that. You want to talk about taking the wind out of your sail. There was nothing LeBron James could do last night to make a difference. No matter how much he pushed and pressed, he needed more than what he had. And unfortunately for the Cleveland Cavaliers, Richard Jefferson, Kevin Love, Iman Shumpert were about as cold could be. They couldn't buy a bucket. We got some from JR for the first time in four games. Excuse me. It was just a bad night for the Cleveland Cavaliers. And here's the thing. It didn't have to be the Cleveland Cavaliers. It could have been anybody last night. When they shoot the ball over 50%, you're going to lose. And that's what the Golden State Warriors did last night. They hit their jump shot with such proficiency last night. It wouldn't have made a difference. It wouldn't have made a difference if the Cavaliers could have, put 127 points on. It's all about the stops. And when you can't stop Golden State, it doesn't make a difference who you're playing. You could have been playing Michael Jordan. You could have been playing Pete Maravich, any of these great shooters. When you're shooting at the rate that the Golden State Warriors are shooting over 50% from the three, every time LeBron pushes the ball to the rack, it doesn't make a difference because all they need is to give you the two, and then they'll take the three. And I saw that from the beginning of that game. You saw them with the mentality that we're going to drop our threes, and they were dropping them. Even Draymond Green was dropping threes. Everybody was raining threes, and no matter what LeBron did, he was pushing twos and trying to get and ones. And there's just no style of basketball that will really resemble this unless you can find ways of stopping it. And that's going to be the number one thing I think everybody's got to do in preparing themselves for this dynasty. I think it was either on Mike and Mike or Stephen A. Smith. One of these guys came up with a nice coined saying, this is called the Golden Empire. Might have been Paul Pierce, the Golden Empire, because this is going to be an empire similar to that of Boston. Might not run as long because the number one thing that most people are going to say about this team is how do you hold them together? And that's going to be something that Golden State's management's got to find a way to do. They've got a great nucleus of guys. So many guys you think will stay, but remember, guys, this is a job. At some point, Curry he's going to want to be paid max money. Thompson's going to want to have max money. Draymond, max money. And Kevin Durant, he's going to get max money next year. So at some point, you got to be able to pay all these guys, and I'm not sure that the salary cap is going to give them that opportunity. But it's going to be fun to watch them for the next couple of years, guys. It will be a golden empire. Enjoy it because you may never see it again. It's kind of like watching Dr. J and watching Magic and actually even watching Michael Jordan. We all talk that there's going to be another one, but do we really believe that? You know, I tell people all the time, people always joke about, some of the great running backs. There'd never be another Jim Brown. I said, well, it depends on what you're looking for. You know, to me, I think Barry Sanders might be the greatest running back that's ever played the game. Why? Because he did more with less. He had a horrible line. He was 185 pounds. He wasn't the fastest guy that was on the field, but he compiled the most yards of anybody over his time. His 12 years in the league compared to Jim's 12 years, they're almost identical. He would have broke Jim's record in the 12th season had he stayed in it. And he's probably one of the few guys that ever played the game. And actually, every single year he played the game, he ran for more than 1,200 yards. Jim Brown can't say that. A lot of guys can't say that, but Barry Sanders can. So we all think that there's going to be another. I tell you right now, enjoy what you see from the Golden State Warriors because we might never see another team that quite shoots the ball this well. I mean, these are great shooters, not necessarily great rebounders or great defensive guys, but as I say, with Golden State, it's about stops, not necessarily about rebounds and field goal percentage because, as I said, when you're hitting twos, they're counting up threes. So if they shoot as many threes as you do twos, they can shoot 47% and still stay close. That's what the difference is, the shooting. These guys are some of the best shooters I've ever seen, will probably ever see. So you're listening to the Legends Show here on the Power of Voices. Joined you for another week, guys. It's been fun. Hopefully I said something that made you go, I didn't think about that. Talk to you next week, guys. See you later.